You know, there's an old adage in hockey: if you can't score, you can't win. On this Halloween night, I'm going to tell a spooky story of the 1971-72 Toronto Maple Leafs. They had a great start to the season, but an 8-game losing streak and a lack of offense in the second half pretty well destroyed them. They did push Boston to 5 games in the playoffs, the eventual Stanley Cup champions, but this was a season of lack of offense and criminality. Now, this was Toronto's 55th season of Operation NHL. They were put in the division this year with the expansion. Vancouver and Buffalo teams, which were in their second season. Chicago had moved to the Western Conference. It was also the 40th anniversary of the opening of Maple Leaf Gardens. The Maple Leafs finished 4th and qualified for the playoffs, losing in the first round to eventual Stanley Cup champion, the Boston Bruins. Now, they're only +1 for the season. Defense was not a problem with Bernie Perron and Jacques Plante, but he only scored 209 goals that campaign. Now, also in June of that year, team president Stafford Smythe and vice president Harold Ballard were arrested for theft and fraud involving funds in Maple Leaf Gardens. They were charged jointly on the theft of $146,000 of funds and securities, and Smythe was further charged for defrauding the Maple Leaf Gardens of $250,000. Now, on October 13th, just after the start of the season, Smythe died of complications from a bleeding ulcer. The Leafs' home opener, scheduled for that night, was postponed. Was only the second postponement in Maple Leaf Gardens history. Now, Paul Henderson was a big guy that year, led by Captain Dave Keon, the future Team Canada hero for the summit, had 38 counters, but Normy Ullman, a great season again, 73 points, including 50 goals. The paperweight Rick Lee, who couldn't fight his way out of a paper bag, had led with 124 minutes in penalties, while Bernie Perron, before he ended up back with the Flyers, had 17 wins and a .256 average. GM was Jim Gregory, with Keon as captain, with John McClellan as a coach. So they finished the campaign 4th in the East with a 34-35-1 record, which is kind of, don't tell the whole story, because 1 point in the season they were challenging for either second and third in the league. Now, they finished with 80 points, 2 games over 500, 28 points behind the Canadians, 29 behind the Rangers, and 39 behind first place holders Boston, were 54, 13, and 11. Now, Toronto went 1-4-1 against Boston, 5-1 against Buffalo, 3-3 against Detroit, 1-4-1 against Montreal, 2-2-2 against the Rangers, 2-2-2 against Vancouver, 3-2-1 in California, couldn't beat Chicago in 6 starts, including 4 losses, 4-1-1 against LA Kings, 2-2-2 against Minnesota, 2-2-2 against the Flyers, 4-2 in Pittsburgh, and 4-2 in St. Louis. So they did better at the West Division for sure. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the situation with Toronto doing well against the West Division got them into the playoffs. Now, they started the campaign with 3 losses in their first 6 starts, and then evened out. They had a nice undefeated streak, but they were winning 3, losing 3, and everything was fine. Pretty much, they had a nice December and an early January, but this has got bizarre. They were 20, 13, and 10 on January 15 after a tough 4-3 win against the Rangers. But then on, this is where it got freaky. 8 straight losses. 4-3 to St. Louis, 1-0 in Montreal, 4-0 in Minnesota, 4-0 in Chicago, 5-3 against the Kings, all on the road, 3-0 against California, 5-2 against Vancouver, and 4-0 against Detroit. So that played a huge factor as well. I think there was some kind of sporting social event going on at Maple Leaf Gardens. Now, the second half of the season, where we're playing mostly at home, it worked to their benefit. Now, this season, again, Normy Ullman led with 73 points. Henderson added 19 assists with 12 power play goals to lead the league, and he had a good, strong +14, which probably led him to be selected in 72. Dave Keon had his typical season, almost 50 points, 18 goals, with 2 shorthanded goals and 5 big game winners. But it was Ronnie Ellis, the unheralded one, money player for sure. He had 23 counters, but 7 were game winners. And the underrated Jim Harrison had 19 goals. Now, the Reclamation Project, Jim McKinney had 36 points, 76 games. The young Daryl Sittler, as a rising star, had 32 points in 74 contests. Former number 1 Gary Monahan had 31 points in 58 games, while Guy Trottier had 9 big goals in 21 points. He was a big playoff factor. And a lot of veterans on the team that year. Billy McMillan was there, Donnie Marshall, Bobby Bond, also a young Brian Spencer was on the team for a while. Now, Bernie and Jacques shared duties pretty well equal. Jacques played the less minutes, but he had 16, 13, and 5 record, the better win-loss, with 2.63 average. Bernie was 17, 18, and 9 with 116 goals against. So again, goal scoring wasn't a big problem. You had, when you don't even have a 30-goal scorer in the team besides Paul Henderson, and Paul always overachieved. Now in the playoffs, in the 5-game against Boston, Keon led the way with 5 points in 5 games. Jim McKenney, 3 big goals, but Jim Harrison had a big goal, and so did Guy Trottier. But Bobby Bond played more games played 5 games in the postseason. He was very effective that year, probably their best defensive defenseman. But he had some good players, like Glennie was there, Keogh, Billy McMillan, Gary Monahan, Mike Pellick, of course, not one of my favorites, but and young Brad Selwood. So the year showed off this. They traded Brian Conacher before the start of the season, and also let Jim Dory go to the Maple Leafs for Pierre Jarry. The interleague draft, he picked up Larry Plow and Brad Selwood from Montreal. They picked up Larry Plow from Montreal, let Brad Selwood go in June, and sent Jerry O'Flaherty to Vancouver in 72 reclamation. Expansion draft, Billy McMillan was lost to the Flames, Brian Marchenko was lost to the Islanders, but again, Brian Spencer went to the Islanders, and a reverse draft, Marv Edwards went there. Now, free agents including Lyle Moffat, Joel Lundgren, and Gordon McRae. Now, this was a draft, of course, in 71 that brought in the great Rick Kehoe, which he traded much too often, but the rest of the draft picks was a shit show. Now, Boston, of course, won the series in 6 games over the Rangers, right after the Rangers knocked out Montreal in a kind of a medium upset. But you were seeing the emergence of Darryl Sittler, but at the time of the mid-70s, Allman and Keon and Henderson were heading to the WHA. That was the big loss with the Toros and the other squads. But Toronto, like I said, the team could not score. I mean, you're only scoring a little bit over, almost not 3 goals a game. But let's put this in rough perspective. To be competitive in the West Division, he scored a lot of goals. Okay, Boston was plus 126. Rangers were plus 125, and the Montreal Games were plus 102. They had all over 108 points. But the lower tier, like I said, even Detroit scored 52 goals more than Toronto. So Toronto's entering every game. They're almost like down 1-0. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's the story of the 1971-72 Toronto Maple Leafs. An interesting year, if not for anything. The jerseys were beautiful. They brought back kind of like not the old Togs, but he brought in the modern mid-70 Togs. Very, very bright jerseys. But to have Ballard and Smythe heading to jail, that was the vibe that year. It was a preamble to the Ballard curse. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you like what you're doing with our hockey podcast, let us know with a like, comment, subscribe, or share.